Welcome back to the fourth video in this series of training videos for the Media Ninja Designer. In this video, I want to start to insert some of the different objects that we have and kind of cover each one individually. I'm trying to keep these videos relatively short, in between 5 and 7 minutes, so we'll see how many of these we can get through. The first three that I do want to cover is image, text, and rich text. So the first thing we're going to cover is the image. With the menu that we currently have from our last video, I'm going to insert just a new image. And as you can see, it gives you a generic image icon as you create the image. Once we have this resized and roughly the shape that we want, we can see in the object properties, when I have it selected, I have a foreground and background property. Now, in the foreground, if we're just going to select an image to be right in the front, we can just select the image. We have 3 different resize options, actually 4, between fit, stretch, fill, and none. These work just like they do in Windows. If you're using a food object, fit tends to be the best option because it maintains the aspect ratio of the original image. So it's not going to stretch it or skew it or make it look weird. It's not going to flatten it out. If we go to stretch, it will literally stretch it out. You can lose aspect ratio depending on how you position it. We can also choose none, which gives you the original size of the image. So whatever size that is, you can't shrink it or expand it. You're just limited to the picture box. So for most things, I'm going to choose fit. Backgrounds, I tend to use stretch just to make sure that there's no edges, and it usually looks good. So for this object, I'm going to use fit. Now, if we were creating a title bar or something that we were going to overlay text onto, and we wanted it to kind of look roughly like this, I would choose foreground and none. So we just have a blank bar here, and then we can choose to make the background a gradient or a solid color or even an image. So if you have an image of a textured background, we could select that and select stretch, and now we're able to use this for a title bar. So in this, we could overlay text and, put the name or the combo or the category that we're using. We could do a few different things. If you don't want to use a textured background, we can generate our own gradients by selecting gradient and then selecting 2 colors to create a gradient with. I'm not sure that this is going to look great, but so if this color scheme matched my background, this would obviously look a lot better, but we're able to create our own squares and basic shapes with just a background picture or the background property of an image. Again, this is build 1.44. In the next patch, by the time you're seeing this video, we're going to have another object or another universal property down here for rounding corners and border controls. So that's going to give you a lot more flexibility when you're creating these types of objects. We can, of course, always choose a solid color. In this case, I think a gradient looks better. And then we can also add a drop shadow to it, which is not very obvious with this background and this color. So that's kind of covering the basic properties of an image. As we start to build menus, we're going to get into some more advanced techniques on how to use this. For example, just quickly, one of the things that I like to do, I'll go ahead and switch this to an image, and we're going to put a background on here. Then we're going to change this to none, and I'm going to stretch this. So if I was using this image as my background, I'm going to go ahead and bring this guy back up. So if this was the background of my menu on screen 1, and the color is just a little too bright, and it kind of washes out my food objects, kind of like it does here, I would insert another image, stretch it over top the background, change the foreground image to none, and then I would change the background to a solid color of black. Now I'm covering up the background completely right now, but if I slide the opacity down, you see that I'm using this now to darken the background because I'm creating a solid color with transparency over top of it. So I could make this really dark, or I could just darken it up a little just to make my food objects pop off the screen a little bit better. This works really well if you have a background that is of similar color to some of your foreground objects, as you can create more contrast between the two. That's just kind of one example of how you can use image objects to manipulate other images or kind of bring out some of the things in other images. As far as the text, as soon as you insert a text, it's going to default to this size and color, which is horrible. So the first thing you're going to do is change this. We can change this to any color. We can actually change this to a gradient in the next patch. We also have its own little text properties panel that pops up when you select text. And these are very specific things to text. We still have our universal controls of rotate, move, width, height, depth, opacity, and shadow, and then we're able to type into the text box here. But for all of the very specific text properties, they're going to come in this panel here. We have a left, right, center justify, the font size, and you're able to type directly into this to specify any font size if you want to get something really large. Underline, italic, and of course bold. And any of the fonts that you have can be used in here, so I'm choosing that font. So there's a lot you can really do with this, and when you combine these with the universal properties, you know, you're able to make it semi-transparent, have this rotated, you know, you can really do a lot with this. And as you start building menus, you'll become more comfortable with combining all the properties together to get it to look exactly the way you want. Now, if we insert a rich text object, this is a little more complicated, but this gives you some real diversity in how you're able to present your text. In some menus, you're going to have a large list of text where it's not just going to be one line or 2 lines, but maybe 10 lines, and you don't want to create a bunch of individual text objects if they have different fonts, sizes, colors, etc. So you would use a rich text object, and we're able to use all the same universal controls, but we also have our rich text editor. And if you click here to edit the rich text, this is where you would enter everything. So, for example, if I can create a list of 3 you can create as many as you want, but I'm going to create 3 here, and I want different fonts, or I want different colors to be all in the same text box, or even just certain letters. We can even change the font size in the middle of our text field. So we're able to do all of these things all at once. This allows you to build very large text objects with one object, so you're not creating a long list of these text objects. Once we hit accept, it will put it into the box, and then of course we're able to move this around or shift it any way we want. One of the other nice things is if we're designing multiple menus, we can save this rich text object to our disk and load it back in another menu or load it into another place. It's also important to note that the size of the object that we create is proportional to the size of the editable text field that we're using. So for example, if I was to make a long rich text object like this and we hit edit, it will give you that same proportion here. So you're able to judge how everything's going to fit together. That makes it extremely useful when you're using these. And of course, all of the universal object properties apply to every single object. So we have the depth, the opacity, and we can combine these, again, we can combine these together to form some really unique looks and feels of our menus. And this is what really gives us a lot of diversity and what makes your menu unique. So these are some of our stronger features as far as being able to compile and build unique, one-of-a-kind menus. Alright, so in the next video, I'm going to cover our three last sections, which is video, text marquee, and image rotator. These are what we call our media objects. And then finally, I'm going to cover our container object, which I'm going to make a whole video separated just for that, as that has a lot of unique features built into it. Alright, I thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.